Every dead Ratman strengthens my faith in you, elf.
It's the Andy and Remington Steel Show on your screens tonight. It's the Andy and Remington Steel Show for your home delight. We're talking about Age of Sigmar and anything else that is cool. Talking about Warhammer Fantasy, it's easy to learn the rules. Andy and Remington, Andy and Remington, Andy and Remington Show.
Welcome, one and all, to the Andy and Rem Show, episode 144 Rats. That's right, it's time to discuss the filthy vermin that crawls beneath our cities and eventually will rise up and take over. And to help us on this journey, we have, as usual, Mr. Remington. See? Right now. There he is, and his blinds are shut. Hello there.
You see how prepared I am for this show? I've got my tea with maple syrup and cinnamon, all set to go. I've sent my photos into Andy. And you know, UB40 once had a famous song, and they sang, "There's a rat in my kitchen. What am I going to do? I'm going to kill that rat. That's what I'm going to do." And those words have stuck with me ever since.
How many rats have you killed in your kitchen since then?
Not enough, because I don't like rats. Mice, I like better. But what's rats? No, I'm not a rat man.
Well, this is
Skaven? Ugh.
it's going to be a very rat-heavy episode. But before we get to that, which is going to include the new Kings of War Rats, very exciting, muscling in on GW's vermin turf, as it were, then a few interesting things dropped in the last 24 hours. First of all, we had some potato cam photos, which GW then rushed to quell the dissent that was directed towards those photos by putting out some high quality HD spicy images. So first of all, we've got the potato cam footage here. And what this appears to be is a Lumineth archer sitting on what was initially described by the community as a kangaroo. I've heard it described as a cow, horse, tiger, kangaroo, a furry dinosaur. From this initial image, what did you think of it?
What did I think of it? I don't think these guys are going to be very frightening on the battlefield whatsoever. They look silly.
Well,
But you know, sometimes things look silly from certain angles. What can I say?
Well,
I
it's
mean,
funny you say that because we've got some better shots. First of all, though, something else that popped up at the same time was this Soulblight Gravelord's Vampire Lord. Now, initially, it doesn't sound like a very exciting name for a character. The Soulblight Gravelords, Vampire Lord, doesn't sound very, very AOS to me. Sounds more old school. So very strange, and with this one, there's a high quality image to come as well. So GW saw that these images were out. They rushed, they mocked, they even made a little potato cam here.
What's a potato cam? Is that like a homemade camera?
It's a derogatory term for a camera that's taken a very poor quality picture because it's not very good.
Right. I see. Okay. Now there are better images that have come through.
Yes, they're even right here, in fact. So
this never happened before. Do you think that they're quelling these people that have stolen pictures and put them up.
I think this did happen once before. I can't remember the exact miniatures in question, but it has happened at least once in the past that I can remember us reporting on. Quite a
Yeah.
while ago, though. It hasn't happened for a long time. They normally put out the images themselves a long time in advance. So someone's sneaking in there with their phone, taking a couple of crude, blurry,
Yeah.
reflection-heavy images. We thought it was a thing of the past, but no. There is an infiltrator, maybe a rat, perhaps. So, we can actually have a look at the full unit here. And you still think they look silly? Now that you can see the full range of poses?
Well, I think the bows are like impossibly big, and that what do I know, right? I'm not a miniature designer. Um, I don't know. Yeah, kangaroo, dinosaur-esque, but uh, I get, mate. Is it practical? I mean, these Lumineth realm lords, they've got very mountainous abodes, so maybe this is the perfect creature to go hopping up and down mountains, rivers, streams.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
point, although the largest mountains tend to often be on top of their heads or mounted on their armour.
I don't know. We'll see, right? We'll see.
It would be interesting if
Should
Lumineth did finally make a choice that was based in practicality, though, compared to every other design choice in the range.
Well, Andy, I was watching the last Star Wars movie, and there's a bit where she's getting trained, sort of in the first 10 minutes, and she's sat cross-legged, hovering in the air, like, having stones hovering around her. And I thought of that, and I thought that's exactly like the best Lumineth figure, the meditating wizard guy,
The
sat
floater.
cross the floater. He's the best one. I don't know. I'd like to see the reaction from the community to these pictures, see what they think. Look, they've got little stags on their helmets. I rather like those, I must admit. They've got pointy hats.
Yeah, it's like a full neck and head atop the helmet. What it needs, though, is for the head on top of the helmet to actually have a hat of its own, which is also a head. And it's like an endless tower, helmets with heads on them.
I mean, do you think these get attacks for their mounts? Because I don't know what that attack would be. What are they going to do? They're going to just sort of
It could flail at you with its little T-Rex arms.
it could like dob you with its nose.
I don't know, maybe
They,
they
they,
maybe they can jump up in the air and give you a good kick and then land on their feet again.
I mean, Stu Gibson's in the house. He's a hard-nosed Scotsman. He doesn't mince words. Stu, do these make you look afraid? These new kangaroo Lumineth.
Yeah, would these terrify you walking the streets of Glasgow?
Would these make you drop your kilt and run? Or would they make you turn around and show them your backside? Not at all, says Stu. You can't, no, that won't work against a hardened Scotsman. But what about a Southerner, right? How would they feel if they were up against the might of the kangaroo rider? They would probably run.
They might well do. You must be fairly southern, though. Come on. You've got a hint of southern in you, at least.
I'm a Midlander, mate, through and through, best of both worlds, full of Eastern promise. That's me.
I don't know about that. I can definitely hear a bit of southern in you.
It's well spoken, I think, is the word.
Let's
Queen's
call it
English.
that. What one thing confuses me with these, the headpiece on the creature. It's difficult to discern exactly what's going on with its head. Like, where is the eye? Is that the eye up there?
Oh, yes, now you
It,
say.
it looks like this thing is kind of draped over where you'd expect the eye to be.
It just looks like a cartoon character. I mean, Brad Jimenez, thank you. He says they should have the option for boxing gloves.
Is that the eye right there? Is that like a furry eyebrow with a tiny eye under it?
I don't know. I mean, do you think these are dual kits?
Most things are.
Right. Well, maybe the other option looks cooler.
Wouldn't bet on that.
No.
But it doesn't seem like the community are warming to these at all.
Oh, I'm not surprised, man.
So,
But there is another model, isn't there, that they revealed, and that one looks more legit. I
this
think.
one. So you can see the little eyes on this. This
That looks great, man. Love that.
It does look kind of similar, but it looks like a slightly different creature, doesn't it? This has got longer front legs, I would suggest.
It's just elegant, more graceful, right? This thing, this would be a man's best friend, where the other thing would just be like a comedy ride at a theme park.
This does definitely look better. The horns, whether they're actually part of the creature or whether they're part of the helmet that the creature's wearing, I think they do add something. They make it look a bit more ferocious than these with their,
Yeah, those horns are au naturel, I would
rather than
say.
just this hair poking out at the back. It's like you want the most threatening part of the creature to be the part that greets you first, I would suggest. But that's kind of the wimpiest part of the whole thing is the face.
I mean, do you think they've just gone like, no one else is making kangaroo models? Let's try that. I don't know. Oh, maybe the Stormcast got the good mounts, you
Well,
know,
that's
because
what
some
I'm
of the
thinking.
Stormcast.
They normally give all the weird and wonderful original creations to the Stormcast to ride around on. So it's about time somebody else got one, but they're arguably scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
I mean, for me, Andy, you know, they've sort of scrapped the Wood Elf Warhawk riders, right? Couldn't they have done like a sort of a Warhawk thing with the Lumineth? I mean, because if they live in mountainous regions, wouldn't it make total sense to ride a beast that could fly? I don't know, just my expert
You're
opinion.
applying logic, though. That could be an issue. Graham says they're fantasy tauntauns. Well,
What?
if the community response is anything to go by, then people do think they smell bad on the outside.
Of course, Tauntauns from Empire Strikes Back and Solo. Yeah, I don't know if they've dated too well, those guys.
Let's have a look at this vampire lord then.
Well, that's a better picture, Andy, because I was a bit worried. And the first thing I noticed, having had and painting a Vampire Count's army in the past, is that there's no rust and decrepitness about the armor
Well,
and the art.
maybe they're very freshly formed vampires, and that's why they haven't been seen yet.
It almost looks like it's just been base coated with edge highlighting, right? And
It does actually.
it looks a bit basic to me. I think you could do a much more terrific job on that paint job, maybe,
I'm sure
right?
it's a stylistic choice, but on a model where there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of detail compared to what we're used to. The armor plates are very, very flat and they cover most of the whole model, don't they? So you'd expect something a bit more intricate with the paintwork make up for that.
For sure. They've gone with like sort of um, Dark Eldar sort of paint scheme, haven't they?
It definitely has that kind of vibe. One that I do kind of like the idea of the bats in the hair. Is that something we haven't seen yet? They're always looking
Not
for something. Everything that flies, you can't just have a flying stand now. That's very old hat. You have to have some kind of danglage attaching you to the rest of the model or the base. And on this occasion, it's the hair, which could be a first.
yeah,
And
I actually like the bats in the hair, and you know, it's given me some ideas now, Andy. I'm getting into this model because I'm thinking, what other things might you see in this Soul Blight army? And what I'm thinking of is witches on broomsticks. What do you think about that? But like, you know, deadly broomsticks.
oh, deadly broomsticks. That changes everything. Yeah.
But you could have sort of like mist and weird fog coming out the broomstick, and that's what it sort of stands on. Could look kind of cool, right?
Rushi says, happy to see vampires again, but I don't like this sculpt. I hope they have more than that. It's giving me mixed messages, this vampire, because when I look at the weapon, that actually looks like quite a brutal, kind of gritty, and as Cedar comments in the chat, Lord of the Rings style mace, which is more kind of realistic and gritty looking. So the weapon, I'm on board with. Looks nice and hefty. Like in the real world, you could do some serious damage with that, and someone could conceivably wield it. It's not cartoonish. I kind of appreciate the shield design a little bit, but the armor is a little bit basic and almost like not necessarily cartoonish, but like it's taken from a comic, perhaps.
I mean, Andy, you might have
like a
heard
graphic novel, maybe.
yeah. I mean, Andy and our faithful viewers, you might have heard this phrase: faces, bases, shields. Now, the shield looks good, the base looks good, the face just looks like it's been base coated.
The face is pretty
Like,
drab.
yeah, they could do so much with the eyes there, and that would really draw you in and give this character much more depth, right? That's what I think. But you know, on the subject of more forces for this Soulblight army, right? We've had witches on broomsticks, mystical broomsticks. What about werewolves? Let's bring out the wolves, man.
If GW were going to do an old school style undead race, I would be on board with that. But I can't see it. I think we're going to have some very stylized vampires like this.
What's the sort of meat and potatoes, or the meat and bones? There you go, like that pun. The meat and bones of this army. Would that just be sort of skeletons and zombies?
Well, I don't think they'll have skeletons, because skeletons, they've done them to death in the Bone Reapers.
Yeah,
So
but you've
that's
got
their
skeleton
thing.
warriors, haven't you? That's their models, right?
Yeah, but I don't think these guys are going to have skeletons. That's just my instinct. I think it could finally be time for a new kind of zombie.
Well, all right, but what about Blood Knights? What about Tomb Guard? Not Tomb Guard. What are they called? Oh, bloody hell! You know, the sort of elite skeleton guard,
Graveguard.
Grave Guard. That's it. Thank you.
I don't think we're going to
I think they're
see.
going to keep
My
that.
instinct is we're not going to see any skeletons in this faction. Watch, someone will play that
Yeah.
clip next to an announcement where they're just entirely skeletons.
Yeah, but Soul Blight is out already, isn't it? But they just don't have many options because Legions of Nagash got a bunch, right? And then the Ghosties got their thing, right? And that kind of then puts skeletons, Graveguard out on the shelf again. And
If they're still in there, I could see them using the skeletons and the graveguard that already exist, but not being a focal point of the army. I think they'll focus on something else, something new and spicy and more original that hasn't been done.
what, as in the sort of infantry?
Yeah, some kind of new zombie,
Right.
or
Okay.
like dog people, something like that.
Now the other thing, Andy, is that vampire counts armies, and you know, they've never traditionally had missile infantry before. Do you think that's something they can bring in? I mean, the most you could get, right, was the Terror Guy's Scream and the Banshee's Wail, right? So you think they'll have anything in the missile zone?
It's hard to say just from this model.
We've also obviously got Black Knights. They're staying in.
So you think this is just something new and spicy to add to the existing range of undead to sell those old models, rather than a
I'm
whole
almost,
new exciting faction?
yeah, I'm almost 100%, because you've got the crypt, you've got the corpse cart as well. 100%, they're keeping that stuff.
I'd be very disappointed if this is all they're going to get. I mean, it's
Give me a bit-
fairly
give me a few
cool,
more
but
heroes.
the aesthetic of it just seems like a little bit of a departure from the previous undead. Is it a lot more stylized, if you will, minimalist?
Well, will we find out on Saturday? Because there's a big reveal this Saturday from Games Workshop, and it's going to show. I think it's going to show the next lot of Luminef, and well, whatever faction this is, it's called the Dead and the Divine, right? So the Dead is obviously this new Soulblight preview, and the Divine, I suppose, being the Luminef Realm Lords.
I'm sure next week's episode will focus heavily on that, with it being the new spice that week. So, let's have a look at this before we go on. So, Middle-earth Classics return. may be kind of interesting. Some of the old Lord of the Rings models that haven't been available for a while apparently are now going to be available again. So, like any of this stuff, have the opportunity to purchase it once more. Any thoughts?
Okay, let's go up again. So what we got there? We got orcs.
Yeah, some of them
Yeah,
are cool. Classic models, if you like them, probably.
do you
What
know, Andy?
more can
I'm
be
still
said?
stuck in the 1985 Lord of the Rings models. They were the first Games Workshop models I ever bought. I think I got some goblins. I got Boromir, mounted Boromir, and Boromir on foot. And I don't know.
Well, we know what happens to Boromir on foot, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, you get stuck with a bunch of arrows, right?
Poor fella. So, next, before we get to the rat discussion, we've got to have our weekly check-in on Remington's shares. So,
Mm.
it's looking like, just from this graph here, without looking too closely, that you may have sold a heap of your shares at the right time.
I did. It's very hard to predict when to sell at the top. Okay, but you can see the all-time high was something around 116 £116 60 a share, and I held on just a little bit too long. You can see that dip in the middle, and then it had a resurgence, and it went up to £113. That's when I sold my 10 shares. I think I sold 9 shares. I made 75% profit. So I think that was pretty cool. So I bought £500 worth of shares a year ago, and I got £400 profit. I kept one share just to keep the interest going, really. And you see that big dip there, that towards the end, that's when I couldn't resist, and I bought half a share more. And the reason is because, as you know, last week Games Workshop released its results, results, and it had the best profit ever. So is this to do with lockdown? I don't know, but they've had all their stores closed, yet they still had a monster of a year. So good news.
While Remington's
In
talking
general.
about GW finances, you're just going to look at the thumbnail for a second, as there's a sudden, subtle change to my setup going on. So you may continue.
I think Andy's getting changed into his lounge gear, maybe, or maybe something more revealing. Who knows? So I don't know. What did I do with my money? You might ask. Well, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I bought into Bitcoin just before it went on its terrific all-time high. So yeah, Remington's doing well. I'm hopping from one investment to the other and earning a nice bit of passive income. And when I reach a certain point, what will I be doing? I may well be investing in a well-known gaming company in Nottingham that's not GW.
Wow, that would be
About that.
amazing.
Support the community, that's what I say. And why not? If you're going to aid people that you know, and you can be part of that growth story. Anyway,
There we
that's
go,
my plan.
and we're back. You'll notice that
What?
I'm suddenly a bit more nicely lit as well.
There you go, Andy. You look very nice. Yeah, so we'll see. I'll keep at least one share, just to keep this gravy train going. Andy, I mean, do you think Games Workshop shares will keep going up? Bear in mind, last year they were like £50 a share, so
Well,
they've doubled
if we keep
in a
in
year.
mind that I am essentially a financial market whiz, as it were, then I would predict that GW's ride will continue to be turbulent, but there will be more ups than downs over the next 12 months, would be my prediction.
I mean, it's fair to say that it's not really a speculative stock because it's well, it earns a decent profit. It's got no debt. It's growing. And well, there you go. All the fundamentals are there. So even though we've seen this drop, sooner or later the fundamentals catch up. So you should see it a steady and slow rise back up.
You know, someone was
Um,
asking me recently if you are actually paid by GW. because of the way
Are
you
we?
talk about them on the show, and you
Can I
heaping them with praise.
Can I just tell you, right? This is one of the first ever Age of Sigmar based shows, and for 6 years on and off, we've been delivering premium content. And I see other channels come completely out the blue and manage to get hundreds of thousands of views in a very short period of time, and they disappear within months. Yet Games Workshop happy to give them copies of this and that. We don't get bugger all on this show, and look at the loyalty. Look at the loyalty, GW. You know, but there you go. I'm not bitter or anything. Even though we've influenced many of your features in Warhammer community, we're still here, not going anywhere. But
Influenced.
I don't get anything. I wish I did. Who's in the chat? Mickey Genva. Where's she been? She's back.
Back in the house. Okay,
Hey,
I think it's time to start talking about rats. So the reason that rats are on the agenda is not because of GW. It's actually Mantic. So Ratkin scurry into Kings of War Vanguard. So we have looked at some of the upcoming Kings of War Ratkin stuff. There's been that giant rat demon and some of the basic troops, but there's some nice character models that have popped up now for Vanguard. And let's get the Remington rat assessment on them and see what the audience think as well. So some of them we may have already seen bits of. So what do you think of this one? Pistol, rats on the back. I think that's a very nice feature.
so are these guys fantasy or future?
These are fantasy. So their technology
Right.
would be kind of a little bit below probably where the Skaven are in Age of Sigmar, I would say.
So what's that? A warp lock pistol? Is it like a what does that shoot? Warp pellets?
It fires something out of it because the Ratmen, whatever setting they're in, they always seem to be kind of crude but magic infused tinkerers generally, don't they?
It's you know what? I was going to say for Mantic, it's a decent scope, but a lot of their scopes are all decent now. So I think they're really smashing it out of the park. So yeah, thumbs up from Remington.
Then there's this one, which looking very priestly with that skull over its head there.
Yeah, it certainly looks very primitive, doesn't it, compared to the pistol guy?
Yes.
What's he going to do? Is he going to hit you with his bone?
I would assume this is a spellcaster, but could also
So he's
stab
gonna
you with
basically
what looks like a ceremonial bone dagger there.
He's got giant worms coming out. He is wearing filthy clothes.
I
mean, he
assume
really
those are
looks no better.
tails.
Wow. I don't know what to say. I think he's gonna rattle his bones at you, and that's about it, really. So I would recommend bleach against this guy.
Next, now this one is pretty ferocious. Very nice paint job on the armor as well. Nice big sword. It's not often you see a free hand on miniatures, is it? Nice big sword.
Free claw.
Some nice blood on it.
It's a sort of a bludgeoning sword, that isn't it? Doesn't look very sharp.
Yeah, it doesn't look that pointy. It's more of like a cleaving weapon, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good sort of butter knife, right?
Well, when you're a rat, the super mutant rat, and I imagine anything you come across is pretty much like butter. Swing at it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, these rats, they don't look comedy, do they? They don't
No.
look like. They look actually quite menacing, like wolf rats.
Okay, now what about this one? That beard on this rat is very, very much giving me Chaos Dwarf vibes.
It's very Assyrian, isn't it? It's very ancient biblicum. Even is that a word? Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I
It's
have to get used
very,
to that thing.
it's very striking. We see what it says about it here. All manner of twisted and desperate beasts. No, that's not to do with that picture. I think the pictures are just thrown in there, not necessarily related to the text. But I will give people, let's pick a random paragraph. Here we go. A Ratkin nest will typically only have a handful of warlocks among its ranks, yet they are respected and feared almost as much as the brood mother and her birthing daughters. They're respected because many claim to still hear the whispers of the wicked ones and recite these words as though they were religious texts. Once touched by magic, a sort of fever descends on the Ratkin in question, pushing them to master more and more powerful magic, which can often lead to madness or death.
Andy, would you like to be the owner of a brood mother? Could be quite a good side hustle, couldn't it? You could sell the rats, the brood mother's brood, on Gumtree. Just a thought.
Is this a Remington $1 million idea?
It's possibly, yeah.
Selling baby
yeah.
rats, probably on the illegal black market. Probably not a good idea. I wonder if wonder what the regulations are like for selling rats. It's probably not the most ethical thing if you just decide to start it up one day.
Well, I did live
For
somewhere
financial
once.
gain.
Before I built Castle Remington and Castle Remington got flooded with sewage, before all that, the one of the places where I lived had a mice infestation. So very familiar with hunting mice and their breeding habits and the way they work and that. And a friend of mine had a rat problem, and he told me the size of a rat trap is almost 3 times bigger than a mouse trap. They're big old things, man. Rats are no joke.
They certainly are not. Every now and then you see one of those pictures come up of somebody that's caught a rat and they hold it up really close to the camera to make it look even bigger. Like absolutely gigantic. And that causes all kinds of headlines like mutant super rats invading, which never actually seems to happen.
What do you think's the biggest strength of Skaven or Ratkin? Is it just like the impossible breed rate of them? There's just so many.
I would
I
assume
mean,
they just overwhelm with numbers typically in fantasy settings, the old Ratmen, don't they?
but I'm surprised the dwarves with their engineering prowess just wouldn't put poison pellets everywhere, you know, and carry the poison back to the rat mother brood, and then sort of wipe out the rat problem that way, rather than trying to meet it head on with guns and steam cannons and the like.
So we've
Seems
got
obvious to me.
the Ratkin Warband set here, and $29.99. You get. Let's have a look at.
Not
Let's go through all the pictures here. So we've looked at him. A nice big armored rat with a drill there.
so
Rats.
all that for 30 English pounds.
Rats burrowing out of the ground, which I think is a nice feature. And it reminds me very much of Vermintide,
Yeah.
with those rat tunnels. So, very nice there. And you can see some of the other models. More though. So this is the Ratkin Warband Booster. So the initial Warband set is just what you would get started with, and then some of the fancier stuff you'd get in the booster, which is here, including a rat riding on a... See what they describe it as here. Because it looks like a moor beast, which is what they refer to them as.
What's a moor beast then? Is it?
Well, it's a terrifying... It's kind of like Mantic's closest thing to a squig, I would say, but they're hairier. That's what it looks like to me. Does it tell you? Doesn't look like it.
I do like the rat. Yeah, I like the rat on the mount there. Looks pretty cool, man.
Very cool indeed. But there's more. Ratkin Vermintide. Look at that. Swarm of rats. So, what this reminds me of, recently I was playing the PC game Plague Tale Innocence, which is
Oh,
all
I saw that in
about.
the sale. I saw that in the sale. Any good?
It's very good. It's set in France in somewhere hundreds of years ago, during, I think it's around the time of the like Crusades and all that kind of stuff. So there's English knights everywhere trying to kill you, and at the same time as this is going on, there's a rat plague. But they're not just any rats. They like strip a man to the bone in seconds, but they don't go in the light. So you have to use the light to prevent them from eating you. But there's just thousands of rats on the screen at any one time, and it reminds me very much of this. It looks very, it's almost like a fluid rats.
Ooh, so it's like 14th century Black Death era.
It's very much like that.
It looks like a very story driven game, Andy. Is it a free world thing, or is it a bit like
You,
Vermintide, where you sort of you can find your
you
way to
don't
where you want
have
to go?
that much freedom, really, but there are different ways you could get from A to B, but it's mostly sneaking around, avoiding rats, avoiding soldiers, occasionally throwing a rock at a soldier's head, or throwing a rock at his torch or his lantern so that the rats will attack him, that kind of stuff.
It sounds like the character's being bullied a bit. Can't she stand up and fight mano el mano, or do you have to sort of reach a certain level of skill
You
before you
can
get to
fight
that?
a little bit, and you get assistance from other characters that can fight a bit more as well. But it just reminded me of that. So if anyone's played that game and looks at this, it's like they both seem like very authentic representation of what an actual tide of rats would be like were they to just
Yeah.
start swarming towards you.
So we've got swarm bases there. Just to break the spell a bit, Andy, you might be interested to know that Leicester City are currently sitting at the top of the Premier League.
For now. Who are they beating?
Chelsea 1-0, but I don't
Oh,
think it'll
1
stay
0.
that way.
Well, you never know. Chelsea haven't been that great lately. So,
There was, in the End Times saga, in the
yes.
final End Times book, there was a great sort of story where a dwarf ends up finding his way into the very heart of the Skaven Empire, somehow gets all the way down there to sort of, see if he can inflict any harm, in the very control room of the Skaven operation. And he eventually finds all these, just basically not eggs, but just millions and millions of rats being produced. Um, and he realizes at that moment there's nothing they could do. Yes, thank you, War. Carrack ate Pete's. He found the brood mothers. Maybe he should have like burnt them all. If he had a good sort of flame cannon or something, maybe it could be like in Aliens 2, where she just torches the place. Maybe he tried. I don't know, but he eventually. Don't know. You don't hear how he dies actually, but there you go.
So,
Oh, he was ambushed and died. There you go.
I'm just pointing it. Well, we've had a look at the new Mantic stuff. Very exciting times, and GW have definitely got some competition in the rat department now. Skaven don't just have it all their own way. Because Mantic did initially have a Ratkin list purely for old Skaven players who are migrating over to Kings of War to actually have rules for their army. But then demand grew and swelled over time, and they started putting out their own range. And it's a
Right.
very nice one it is too.
One of the most fun I had playing Age of Sigmar, Andy, was with my Gloomspite Gits against a Skaven army by a guy called Kyle, and it was really good fun actually. And it went down to the very last turn, but I got defeated. But yeah, it was really good fun.
I have played quite a few games in Age of Sigmar against the Skaven actually. There's quite a few battle reports on this channel, probably at least 3 or 4 of them. And very nice. It's a nice aesthetic, I think Skaven have always had. That's one thing I liked about them back in the day. It was always a little bit intimidating to actually start an army because you would need so many rats generally. But speaking of back in the day, let's go back and trace the steps of the rat folk. So, you sent me a link to this, which is some old Skaven models. So let's talk a little bit about our early exposure to Skaven. So I'll let you go first and talk through this a bit, and then I will be discussing this book that was a rat-based influence on me years ago.
Now, I don't know whether. Oh, Skaven Slayer. Yeah, great book. I don't know if these were the first ever Skaven models. Probably not, but this is the first bunch I ever got. And the first Skaven miniature I ever had was the Vermin Lord there. You can see at the top, holding aloft his sort of spear, and they had a few little sort of plague crystal balls to throw, gas balls. And that came with some kind of, yeah, it came with two other Skaven that aren't pictured in this picture, but one of them had like barrels on his back and the other one had a little gun. I don't know what you call that. Is it a warp fire thrower, maybe? Yeah, probably an early warp fire thrower. But what I like about this picture, you can see the earliest incarnations of what would become separate units in the Skaven army. So you've got Plague Sensor Bearer with staff, and they became sort of plague monks. Well, you got a plague monk there at the top holding aloft that scroll. And then you also got the Gutter Runners and the Clan Rats. And you've also got Clan Skyer with Poison Winglobe at the top there. More Gutter Runners. Yeah, and Clan Rats. So you've got like the foundations there of what the Skaven would become.
That's often how it went back in the day. You look back to the old miniatures, often it would be just a couple of models, or there would be an illustration in a rule book of a particular race, and then that would get fleshed out over time. So you can definitely see the beginnings of it all here. Notice this one, this Clan Moulder Mutant has got 3 arms.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mention him. Yep, yep. I really like these sculpts. Still, I think they stand up really well.
Yeah, they're very characterful, and they don't look too like weird and comical considering how old they are. They still look quite good. Then, when I was getting into Warhammer, this was pretty much what you saw when you thought of Skaven. Single pose, plastic was the order of the day when I was starting, and the Skaven clan rat was pretty much everywhere. So you saw these not only in their individual box, but they also came in Warhammer Quest as well, which is where I first got some of them. And I always thought they looked pretty cool, actually. There is something nice and regimented and uniform about the old single pose plastics. Not all of them were good. Some of them, I think the clan rats here were quite nice. The variety in the shields helps a lot. It's not like which ones maybe aren't as good. Yeah, I actually quite like the Wood Elf archers, even though they all do look the same, I believe. But these ones,
I've got them still. I've still got those ones.
bit of shield variety on the Skaven.
Yeah, Andy was been writing a lot in the chat here. He says, I've seen many third-party firms do better than GW on their own races. For example, 40k Orcs are better than third-party. But Rats, I can't find anyone I like more than GW's own sculpts on Skaven. So there you are.
Well, Mantic are definitely giving them a run for their money now.
I don't know if you remember back in the day when they had points for models. Sometimes they had 3.5 points per model, or even 2.25 points sometimes.
Clan Rats have always been one of the least expensive models you could take from me. So this, even though it's the second book in the series, these two, let's make sure there's no light glaring on it, these two legendary heroes there. Seems like Felix has disappeared a bit lately, fortunately. But Skaven Slayer, it was the first one I read in the series. So this was actually the first GW novel of any kind that I read. And I went on to get more in the series, which I've got on my shelf down here. But this one, the depiction of the rats, I always found interesting. The way they would use the warp stone almost like drugs, higher ups in the rat society would. and the
Yeah.
lower ones would just kind of be a swarm almost in the sewers. But they put across the sense that they're obviously very cowardly when they're in small numbers, but when there's enough of them and they swarm you, they do build the growing confidence, which is something that was often reflected in the rules. You would have that kind of thing in there, and very interesting book. Lots of swarming, lots of disgusting rat mutants in the sewers, descriptions of rats.
Andy, is it the first appearance of Thanquol?
It could well be, actually. Now, I haven't read this for, let's think how long it must have been now. Over 20 years, definitely. So I'm just going to crack this open and read you a paragraph now. See if I can.
All right.
Let's see if I can find a good, juicy bit. Here's one. The sewers had never seemed so ominous to Felix. Shadows danced away from the lantern. Every time he heard Rudy's heavy tread behind him, he had to fight the urge to look around. The sound of the Slayer continually tapping the walls with his hatchet blade was getting on his nerves. He knew that Gotrek was only doing it to see if he could find a hollow area, but that did not make it any easier to take. Something was out there. He knew that. Something had killed Hef and Spider, and their girl too, and it would surely kill the rest of them if they let it. It was the not knowing that was so terrifying, not knowing what it was that hunted them, not really knowing why, not knowing how many Skaven might appear, nor what demonic henchmen they might have. The brothers had been formidable fighters, and they were gone. Lots of traipsing around in the sewers looking for rats, then finding something really terrifying. And one thing that was interesting about the Skaven in the old world, in Warhammer of course, is the way they would influence. They're not necessarily trying to just take over a city, because that sounds like a lot of work and you would then have to sustain it. What they like to do is kind of just dwell underneath and influence the politics above, while remaining below.
You know, speaking of politics, Andy, that's something we don't really have in Age of Sigmar anymore. But it was definitely a big deal in the old world, in the Reich. You know, there's all kinds of mischief going on, underground, overground, betrayals, necromancy.
The Skaven were a big part of that as well. And in this book, if my memory serves me correctly, there are parts where Skaven diplomats, if you will be threatening like city officials. I always found that quite interesting. And the way the Skaven talk as well, their speech patterns, which have been pretty consistent actually, all the way into the Vermintide games, the way they'll repeat certain words like kill, kill, stab, stab, that kind of thing.
Now, I'm not sure, Andy, whether it's based in Altdorf or it's based in Nuln.
This one is based in Nuln.
I thought so, because there's one point in the book where they go under the sewers and they go in. They end up getting some steam tank. They end up getting some heavy weaponry involved.
We'll have to read it to find out. I wonder how fast I'd get sued if I did like a live series reading it on Twitch or something.
You might be able to get the audio book on Audible. I know there are a few of the Gotrek and Felix books available as audiobooks.
I'd get sued instantly. But
I think that would be fun
though.
I've got the first, second, and third omnibus of Gotrek and Felix. So yeah, Skaven Slayer is in the first omnibus.
Skaven Flayer, maybe we could do a series called that.
Skaven Flayer.
So
what are these?
These are the updated clan rats, where they weren't single pose anymore. Now they're much more exciting. They've got all manner of weapons and face expressions, even though it's usually just kind of that.
Andy, what I would find frustrating is with painting a Skaven army is that all the troopers are really hunched over. So you could spend a long time painting the detail on the faces, but when you're looking at them from the tabletop, you're looking down on them, and so you don't see any of that detail. All you see is like these hunched backs.
It's the same with the ghouls as well.
Yeah.
When they lean forward, you put in so much effort onto the underside of them, and no one ever sees it unless they crouch down.
For sure. Maybe they could have more dynamic poses and, you know what I mean? Reaching upwards, looking sideways.
Brad says those are too cartoony. I don't know. What do you think about the difference? Because these ones look very kind of militarized, don't they? Look more well drilled, not just because they're in single pose. Their weapons look fairly clean, and they've got different shield designs that look like there's some effort gone into it. Their outfits are not too like scabby and disgusting. These ones definitely, apart from the leader maybe, it looks a lot more cobbled together. The clothing, shields don't look as clean. The weapons are more, what would be a good term, hodgepodge, like a stick with something on the end of it rather than a nicely crafted sword. More like they've been foraged, some of their equipment. That's the direction they were taking them in. So let's look. This is the old Vermin Lord. So we saw the very old Vermin Lord, who that name was then taken by this large. It's pretty much their equivalent of a greater demon, isn't it?
Yeah, this early metal sculpt wouldn't have been anywhere near as big as the as the new Vermin Lords, though, right?
Well, we're going to look at a comparison shot now, actually. So there's that, and then there's this is a multi-kit, so I can't remember exactly which one this is,
Yeah.
but there's several different ones that you can make out of the kit. It's very big, very dynamic, but there is something to be said. I do like these old, clearly hand-sculpted miniatures. There is
Yeah, I
something
mean,
about
I,
them.
I, I might be wrong, but this maybe was sculpted by the couple, Ali and Trish Morrison.
Could well be. But
It looks
compare it
like
to this. This is obviously a superior piece of engineering because technology has moved on so much. But does it really have as much character as that? I
the
don't
problem
know.
is, yeah, when you've got such large horns, it does take away from the face a lot, you know.
The face, it's got like a little mischievous grin going on there, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I always thought that looked cool. And this one, not so sure about, but then we've also got the likes of this, which is obviously a modern a piece of plastic engineering again. But I think this
This
actually
is
looks.
amazing.
This is an example of it done well. I think.
Amazing. This was the model I just couldn't kill it when I played against the Skaven. Just so tough, and
Gotta
they
all
keep
help
coming
it.
back to life.
It's always a horrifying sign when you can't immediately tell where the face is on a monster. It's
There
like
was some
this
awesome,
horrible mutated blob. It seems like there maybe should be a head there, but then there's like an extra torso on top of that.
yeah. There's a ton of conversions out there. I used to watch 8th edition battle reports, and there was some really good like conversions of this model. Real funny ones too.
It's pretty much limitless potential for what you could do with this. It's the same as something like a Chaos Spawn. You can pretty much do anything. It's acceptable.
Yeah.
Then we had things like this. Good old Screaming Bell. Now, there is an older version of the Screaming Bell, isn't there? But as we chart the trajectory of the Skaven over the years, we end up with these big, juicy multi kits. And I prefer this one actually to the whatever the other thing's called that you can make it into.
Was it a plague thrower or something like that?
Plague Furnace, maybe?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think I prefer the bell.
yeah. Me too, I think.
Pretty cool.
Um, but yeah, there was a time, Andy. I don't know if it's still true, but Skaven had one of the biggest ranges. You know, in terms of the amount of different models you could get.
They they definitely have a wide variety because the different clans within the Skaven as well, and not all factions had as wide a variety going back. If you compare them to another a race like, let's say, goblins, you've got your night goblins and your forest goblins. Skaven, you've got how many clans is it? 4.
Sure. I mean, you had monstrous infantry, you had big Kahuna monsters, you had siege weaponry. All right, you had your basic infantry, medium infantry, tough infantry, heroes, assassins, wizards. Did you have cavalry? Did Ratman have cavalry? I don't
I
know.
don't remember them having any cavalry specifically.
They didn't have any flying, so I think there you go.
Then, as we got to around the end times, you saw this kind of madness popping up as well, as the technology was clearly increasing exponentially. And I don't know how I felt about these, because there was a time when the miniatures started to look less characterful maybe, and more towards the kind of action figure realm, where it's just if it looks cool, it's been slapped on there. There's an
I mean,
element of that.
these ones basically eradicated the rat ogre. They just put the rat ogre. It made it look like a real primitive, naked, rubbishy thing. Why would you even want a rat ogre when you can have these guys with, like, you know what I mean, automatic weaponry on them?
And these kind of models are the reason that I think the slightly grittier look that it seems like Mantic are going for. The technology isn't quite so crazy and wild. They've got a pistol here and there, but they haven't got anything like this. I think keeping it reined in and not quite so wild and cartoonish in the technology, I think would be a good move for Mantic. Differentiate themselves a bit. And people that think, what were some of the early examples? Things like the plastic dwarf gyrocopter,
Yeah.
compared to the previous ones, suddenly looked a bit more like a toy, didn't it?
Hmm.
Much smoother. And you can actually see kind of elements of that in the armor of this guy here. Very smooth looking armor.
I mean, anyone would have thought this could easily be a 40k model,
That is another
right?
thing that where they've over the years they've been blurring the lines between fantasy and sci-fi as well.
But they don't have Skaven in 40k. I don't see why they couldn't blur those lines
Well,
like they do with chaos.
that's a domain that Mantic kind of got the jump on them in with their Via Min, Dead Zone,
Yeah,
and the Warpath universe.
yeah. I mean, Andy, have you ever been tempted to forge a Skaven force of your own?
Yes, actually. So back in the day, when how old would I have been? Probably early teens. When I was thinking about starting a new army, and Halfling Pete was also thinking about starting a new army, and we made what was known as the random army generator or something, where we would just write down the names of all the armies in Warhammer, put them in like a
Yeah.
sock, and then draw them out. And then whichever one you got, then go and plan an army and create it. At one point, I did actually pull out Skaven, but it never ended up happening because presumably, as a child, I wasn't just swimming in cash, so I wasn't able to just go out and immediately buy an army. And then by the time I was able to do it, when maybe Christmas was coming up, the interest of our playing group had probably moved on to a different game by then. So it didn't end up happening, but it was pretty damn close. I do remember looking through all the White Wars of the time and being very impressed with the vast Skaven armies on display. I always thought they looked really cool. So it's something I did want to do a long time ago. I don't think you've had a Skaven army, have you?
No, no, no. It's just the numbers, really. The numbers put me off. I do like the character models. Do like the I do like the models, but it's just the massive infantry number. I wouldn't want to do it.
By the way, one thing that's horrifying me at the moment, rightly pointed out by Nurgling chat, is that we're only on 9 likes and 20 viewers. That's the kind
Yeah,
of
I
thing
mean,
that boils my blood.
it's an elite show, Andy. This is an elite show, and the audience that we get are the elite of Age of Sigmar. You know, they're not the riffraff that just channel hop.
On that topic,
Mm.
actually, people were commenting earlier that shows on this channel don't seem to let you know when they're coming up sometimes, and you can't find them until a while after they've been on the air. And also, YouTube are well known for not allowing monetization on the video, suggesting that it's not suitable for all advertisers. And then 10 minutes after I appeal, they say, oh, actually, we were wrong, it's fine. Every single time, yet every single time they continue to not allow monetization until I appeal. So I think there's a YouTube-wide conspiracy to bury this channel. And I think the only way we can break through that glass ceiling is to just like and comment endlessly.
Yeah, that's one thing. What we got next? We got what the hell is that, Andy?
We have, but before that, looks like you've been painting something.
Oh, you bet. I'm always painting something, guys. Look at this. I've almost finished a little war band from Warcry. These are the K-Knight Shadow Stalkers, and I'm just got 2 models left to finish there, and I've finished the warband. But there is one model which nearly made me, oh god, it was driving me mental, man. I didn't assemble it quite correctly, and I've come to paint it, and one of the arms doesn't fit properly. It's this guy here. Like, you might argue he's one of the coolest models in this range. Yeah, he's holding his cloak out. It's all very good until you try and stick on the other arm, which doesn't really work properly if you've already stuck on the head. I've just given up on it, mate. I've really messed it up, but I hope you like my paint jobs.
You've made Brad grown, actually, with more elves. Like, seems all you paint is elves.
Uh, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I've been back on the Wood Elf trail. I've just decided to finish off
I
all
think you
them.
need to paint A, Halfling Witch Hunter,
Yes, yes,
B,
yes,
Remington the Chaos Tainted.
yes.
Both of
That is
those.
true. They are next on my hobby list, and then of course these guys.
Dun, dun, dun. Necromantic Horror Blood Bowl team.
Yes. I
Exciting
couldn't find
times.
this anywhere. Before the lockdown, they didn't have it in my local hobby store, but I did manage to get to Warhammer World, and I bought them from Warhammer World. Yeah.
Now, a rare sight, something made it off my painting table in complete form. This is Sergio the Saxman from Bad Squiddo Games that I was painting across 2 live streams, and then after these streams he just got a bit of varnishing and some base decoration with some tufts there. So what do you think of that?
He's got the same pose as my dog when I take him for a walk, just when he's about to do a number 2. Can always
That's
tell.
that's the pose for optimal, like, sax energy, I think.
Yeah.
Like
Is this
maximum lung
sculpted?
power.
This looks exactly like the sax player from Tina Turner's band in Simply the Best.
I'm sure that's purely coincidental.
And it's amazing. Really cool, man. It's a great sculpt.
And a great paint job, perhaps?
Uh, I think you must be one of the only painters on YouTube to do orange and purple together. But you're repping Bad Squiddo Games there. I like it.
Yep, it looks good. It's the Bad Squiddo Games colour scheme, as you can see from their logo there. And also, you can't
Yes.
go wrong with a bit of orange. I think it works on this model. I think it looks good.
Yeah, it works. I mean, has she seen the sales shot up since you
I can only
releasing these
assume
paints?
yes. And if anyone is, of course, buying this miniature from Bad Squiddo Games, don't forget to use the code in the description. All the videos on this channel. Scroll, I think it's right at the bottom of the video description. Use that code to get a free chicken your order from Bad Squiddo. Why wouldn't you?
Unless you're a vegetarian, maybe.
Well, you could paint and celebrate chickens. You don't have to actually put it in a situation where it's going to get eaten.
Well, I don't like to count my chickens, Andy, before they hatch.
Well, it's time for everyone's favourite segment. And are you ready? Because,
I am ready, but I only have 7 minutes left until I have to take the dog.
well, they better hurry up and tell us what the hell is that? So while people are looking at that, to speed things along a bit, I'm now going to give you the intro. So get your thinking caps on.
Is it a chaos dwarf or a vampire bear? Oh, what the hell is that? What the hell is that? Oh, what the hell is that? What the hell is that? Only Andy and Remington, Andy and Remy, Andy and Remington know. What the hell is that? What the hell is that? Is it Sigmar's speed or Neferata's hat? Oh, what the hell is that? Oh, what the hell is that? Is it a mangled squig or a sorcerer's rat? Only Andy and Remington, Andy and Remy, Andy and Remington know.
Okay, here we are, back. What the hell is that? It's not a particularly difficult one, I feel. Not as crazy as some of the others we've had recently, so I think someone's going to get this rapidly.
Is it a set of teeth?
It could be.
Is it a foot
It could
or a
be.
claw?
We'll give people a minute or so to try and figure it out, and then I'll start dropping clues if no one's got the courage to guess.
Is it something Skaven related?
Well, that would be quite thematic and in keeping with our discussion topic, wouldn't it?
Oh, our genius William Matthews has said plague priest. It's come out of nowhere, right? Again,
Well,
the
it's
guess,
funny
but
you should say
is it
that
right?
because there you go.
Wow.
And when we were looking at those old Skaven a minute ago, I did notice that it's very similar. One in that old metal range.
Yeah,
Ripping the
true.
scroll from above like that.
It's true. William Matthews, he just comes on the show just to get this right and to claim his free model from Bad Squiddo Games, hand delivered by Mickey Genver, apparently. So well done, William. Just
Am I missing
Mickey...
something? Is there a pre-show meeting where we discuss everyone else doing work on our behalf?
Andy, there needs to be like some kind of prize. So yeah,
He has already had a prize.
What was the prize?
I believe William was the recipient of a Bad Squiddo voucher.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Hand delivered by Mickey Genver.
It's your turn to give away a prize. What about a couple of shares in Remington Industries?
Couple of shares in Remington Industries. Now that's an amazing prize. An amazing investment for your future and your children's future. Will Matthews says he's already received a voucher. Really?
There you go.
Wait, actually,
yes.
That actually happened. Wow, what I said actually came to be.
So
that's amazing.
It's time to wrap the episode up. But before then, a couple of points of business. First of all, there's your thumbnail to look at. And while you're looking at that, don't forget to like the video and comment after the show as well. I think those are the two important things that'll probably drive the YouTube numbers up and stop them burying this channel. They just don't like us because we speak the hard truth. We're down there in the trenches getting our hands dirty, getting the real story. I think that's how it works. So, before we go, it's that time of the week when I offer a very special thanks to the following people who have pledged on Patreon to a sufficient level to achieve a personal thanks. at the end of each episode. But thanks to all the patrons, obviously. But extra special thanks to the following people: Graham, Rushi, Tim, John, Eric, Barbara, and Guy. All of you, extra spicy. Everyone else lacking a little bit of spice, so you may want to get pledging away in there. Going to increase your spice
Amazing,
levels.
guys. But stay strong in this lockdown. You know, we're halfway through it.
We're still in these turbulent times, but there is light at the end of this very, very dark tunnel as the worldwide vaccine rollouts continue. Hopefully the world can get back to normal at some point in the future. Until then, you just got to hang in there, be patient, and keep watching this show as the beacon of light in these dark times.
And maybe one day we'll see you in person at RemCon.
Maybe we will. Maybe you'll be one of the 2 people attending RemCon, or maybe you'll be one of the thousands swarming to attend Andy Palooza. Who knows?
Like a vermintide. Or would you rather be the elite at RemCon?
That's one way of putting it.
You decide.
Yes. And with that, all that remains to be said is, good night out there. Whatever.
It's the Andy and Remington Steel Show on your screens tonight. It's the Andy and Remington Steel Show for your home delight. We're talking about Age of Sigmar and anything else that is cool. Talking about